Joining me this afternoon on our panel of politicians, the Labor MP Graham Perrett and the National Senator Bridget McKenzie. Good afternoon to both of you and thank you for your time. You would have heard Minister Albanese in that news conference alluding to a doorstop that the opposition leader Tony Abbott held this morning. In that news conference he was asked twice when he first heard about the Qantas lockout of staff. He seemed to avoid that question a couple of times, and when he was asked the second time he quickly brought the news conference to an end. Here's some of that doorstop from this morning.
The question was whether your office was forewarned of the dispute. Can you answer that?
My office was in regular contact with Qantas. Qantas, as anyone in Parliament House would know, have basically been patrolling the corridors of Parliament House for weeks now, alerting people to the seriousness of the dispute.
Bridget McKenzie, as I mentioned earlier, the opposition leader's office is now saying that Mr Abbott first learnt about the Qantas lockout at 4:15 on Saturday. If that's the case, why didn't Mr Abbott say that, do you think? He could have handled those questions, that news conference, a little earlier, a bit better, couldn't he?
Well, I think the real question, Ashley, is how the government, and particularly Prime Minister Gillard, handled the news from Qantas on Saturday, not how Tony handled a press question this morning.
But even so, it is quite a crucial twist in this story, isn't it? Because Mr Albanese seems to be suggesting there that Mr Abbott may have had some prior warning of this. We do know, of course, that the New South Wales and the Victorian Liberal premiers earlier last week were calling on the government to intervene. So there has been rumours floating around over the past few days that the coalition may have had some sort of heads up on this. And when Mr Abbott was asked to clarify, he couldn't do it this morning in that doorstop.
Well, I can't really comment. I can only take Tony's office has said that he didn't hear about that till 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and I think we have to take him at his word. The fact that Liberal premiers were calling for the government to intervene in this issue is the real question of why the government took so long to act around this issue that's been brewing for months.
Graham Perrett, there certainly is no evidence at this stage that the coalition did have a heads up from Qantas, but if that does turn out to be the case, well, what does that say about the way your government has been dealing with Qantas in recent weeks and months, that if that was the case, that Qantas would go to the coalition first over the Minister, Anthony Albanese, who he had been in discussions with the airline for months?
Look, it's no surprise that the Labor Party has strong connections to the union movement. We're not ashamed of our connections. We're out in the open. The reality is, as a government, we have to act in the nation's interests. We have to act in the nation's interests. Obviously, Mr Abbott has a different set of rules, but the government, the Gillard government, acted quickly, acted appropriately. Mr Abbott's approach is obviously to walk into a room with a sledgehammer and say, where do I start negotiating? We believe in the negotiating process. I would have thought that grounding every plane and locking your workers out might have been something that you consider as a last option. I'm sure the people at Virgin were very surprised that Qantas decided to go down that road, and the people that ended up on Virgin planes and alternative planes would have been a bit surprised. I would have thought we could have sat down and negotiated, and the government, the Gillard government, supports negotiation between workers, between good bosses and their employees. That's the best way to do things. It's the power that Mr Abbott talked about, what the Labor government should have done at 5 minutes past 2 on Saturday afternoon. That's ridiculous. It's a power that John Howard never used in all his time in government. So he's being a bit overreactive.
Well, we are going to no doubt hear a lot more on this Qantas issue in question time, which is coming up in just a few minutes. Before we take our viewers there live, I am keen to raise the other big issue around there in Canberra today, and that is, of course, coal seam gas. We've seen today the independent MP, Tony Windsor, calling for more environmental studies to be done on the impacts of coal seam gas. He's linking that to the mining tax, suggesting that he needs the government to give him something on coal seam gas in order to support the mining tax. Bridget McKenzie, what's the National's position on coal seam gas? We've seen the Greens calling for a moratorium on coal seam gas exploration until more environmental research has been done. Do you think there's credit in that idea?
Well, Ashley, the Senate is actually conducting an inquiry led by the Nationals into the coal seam gas issue. And you're right, it is a complex problem. There's the state issue, there's the property rights of farmers, there's the environmental aspects, water, etc., combined with the economic development that mining itself brings to the regions. And getting a handle on the complexity of that issue is difficult, and I think the Nationals are keen to make sure that a balanced approach is found, and we would be arguing to see the outcome of the Senate inquiry, have all the information in front of us, and then to be able to move forward with a solution that actually balances the environmental, social and economic impacts of mining with regional communities.
Graham Perrett, considering these inquiries are underway, should we be putting a hold on any further coal seam gas exploration until they're wrapped up?
Look, as a Queenslander, where so much of the coal seam gas industry is focused at the moment, it's a boom industry, bringing a lot of opportunities. You know, $40 billion worth of projects lined up, ready to come through. So a moratorium, that joint National Party Greens ticket, might be a little bit hard to understand, but a moratorium just plucked out of the blue, obviously. Look, the reality is the states have control over these environmental issues. The states have control under the Constitution over so much of these projects. So I think a moratorium plucked out of there before the committee has produced any information, I think might be a little bit premature. Obviously, it's important that we protect our farming land. That's a great resource. It's important that we protect our environment and our communities that are, you know, some that are struggling, some that are booming under this sort of patchwork economy. But a moratorium, I'd need to see the data a little bit more before I supported such a thing. And remember, we do have a constitution that says the Queensland government, the New South Wales government are the governments responsible for environmental concerns that come with coal seam gas exploration and processing.
Okay, Graham Perrett and Bridget McKenzie, we are out of time for the program today. Thank you for joining us. As always, we appreciate your input, and we are shortly going to be taking you to question time. But just to alert you to some of the things coming up this afternoon in the political world, of course, it's not all about